We will get the morning started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I just want to take a moment to recognize the importance of the work we're going to do today and this morning. Last year, as a board's first development session, we discussed the overarching mission and vision of the University of Missouri system, culminating in the Missouri Compacts for Achieving Excellence. What we're doing here today, taking the time to learn about issues underpinning those compacts, is integral to good governance of the four universities. With that, thank you for being here, and I will turn it over to President Moon Choi.
Thank you, Chairman Sunvold. Today, we will be examining an issue that strikes at the core of student success, and that is student mental health and counseling support. Yesterday, we had a very engaging discussion with faculty members from all four universities, and today we hope to continue that discussion and identify ways to better support our students. To begin this discussion, we've identified and invited a group of subject matter experts, academic administrators, and students to share their insights and to listen to your perspectives. Moderating the panel today will be Dr. Chris Sullivan, Director of Health, Counseling, and Disability Access Services at UMSL. Dr. Sullivan, please join us.
I believe this is on. Yes. All right, good morning. So we are here today to talk about college mental health. This has been something that's been very present in the media. There's a lot more talk about this with it. Unfortunately, it seems that most of it seems to attract most of the negative attention when you hear about the things that are happening that aren't going well with it. We hope today to kind of give a more rounded view of it. We've been making considerable efforts in this area as college mental health professionals with it. So we have really kind of three areas we're going to be engaged in this morning with it to have this, what we hope is an open and engaged conversation with it. So we'll start out with just kind of a brief presentation kind of about how we got to where we are right now, kind of what are the major issues, kind of what's arising across the country, because we'll find that this is pretty much common to every university. College mental health is surprisingly kind of common across the country, many of the certain issues. And then we're going to have, as President Choi mentioned, we'll have a panel with some professionals from across the system. And then we're going to have a group discussion with it and then wrap up from there with it. So again, I hope this is a chance for us to have a conversation. If you have questions, issues, the things that we have, really a chance to have a full conversation about this. So I would like to introduce Dr. Patty Fleck to start off this morning.
So later, you will be meeting my colleagues, as you see here, and these are going to be our panelists. And I'm going to talk about what's going on with college mental health and well-being. So the big picture, I want to talk about what has changed over the years since I was in college, since you were in college, since our children were in college. And one of the things that I'd like you to know is that the demand for mental health services is increasing nationwide, and also in Missouri and at our respective campuses. And part of that is that we are a victim of our own success. We have done a great job of reducing stigma around mental health and help-seeking behaviors. College is more accessible to students than it used to be, with disability support and just the encouragement to further education. More and more students are coming to campus. And then the prevalence of mental health issues has increased for many reasons. Many of us are aware of social media and the impact that that has on how we see the world, how we see ourselves, and how we cope with life. We're more aware of violence, which may be increasing in the world. There's climate changes and some of that expectations about what the future will be like. And again, I think sexual assault is much more aware in the media. The other thing is that not only is services being utilized at a higher rate, they're being utilized at a higher rate than enrollment has increased. And that's pretty significant. Expectations of universities have and will continue to change as well. And one of the things that we college counseling center directors really struggle with is, what is our scope of practice? How do we serve the most students and provide them with the best services possible? What is in our scope of practice and what isn't? And I liken this to student health in that there's many, many things that student health does in terms of prevention and treating illness and injury, but there are limits to what student health will do. And there are limits to what student counseling can do as well. We are not residential, we are not hospitalization, and even though we're very good at what we do, we can't be all things to all people at all times. Another broad concept to think about is access versus treatment, and that's a balance. Can we get people in quickly and find out what their presenting concerns are, figure out what is the best way of meeting those needs, and then there's treatment, and that's an ongoing service delivery, and those two are balanced. The more access, immediate walk-in services you have, the less resources you have for treatment. And if you're not doing treatment, then you're not really serving the students. So it's a dynamic balance that we really struggle to maintain and figure out what is the best way to manage that. In addition to direct services, whether that's individual, group, consultation, we also want to do education prevention so that we're not just treating or triaging what comes in the door. We want to move upstream and really decrease what's coming down the pike so that we give students information and skills to cope and be successful. So, centers nationwide and in Missouri and at MU, Missouri University, are really struggled to keep up with that pace. And existing staff can be put at risk of burnout, which, in addition to being hard on us providers, really then decreases the effectiveness of the services that we provide. So one of the things I want to talk about is, again, more students are coming to college with mental health concerns and more awareness. So on these two graphs, you can see that students are coming to campus with prior services. So prior to college, about 21% have had counseling before they've arrived, and then 18% use services after they come to campus. About 14% have seen counseling both before and during college. And then taking prescription medication for mental health concerns. About 8% have done that before they arrive at college, and then 13% begin medication after they arrive at college. And for that population having before and during college, it's about 12%. So what brings students to mental health services? Stress, anxiety, sleep, depression, all are above colds and flus. And these are the percentages that negatively impact their academic performance. So it's not just that we are taking care of our students' mental health because it's the right thing to do. We're also serving the students' success both academically and their futures. And again, these things are increasing. So you can see that anxiety over the years has increased 13%. Sleep is up 1%. Major depression is up 12%. Panic attacks, which is a form of anxiety, is up 13%. Eating disorders up almost 3%. And again, having experienced none of these at all is down 10%. And this is specific to Missouri schools. This is our Partners in Prevention statewide data.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Have you tracked the student population versus the population as a whole? For example, are those numbers and the rise in those numbers of students any different than they are for the population?
I believe they're pretty much on par. Any of my colleagues want to chime in on that? Yes, pretty much on par for students and non-students. And actually, university and colleges are a protected environment in that there's a lot more support and a lot more resources. One of the challenges that we face is that the community resources are pretty well tapped out too, especially psychiatric services. So there's several months wait list in most communities to get into any kind of a provider, if you have access to them at all. So there's transportation, there's cost.
Thank you.
In terms of suicidal ideation, you can see on these lines that the suicide attempts, which is the red line on the bottom, has stayed pretty much flat, which is pretty good news. Suicidal thoughts, which is the blue line, you can see has increased from 15% in 2014 up to 23% in 2019. And again, this is Missouri data from Partners in Prevention. The green line is, I think, also pretty significant, and that is of those two, the red line and the blue line, those two data sets, within those, how many people have sought assistance? And at the very most, people who have had suicidal thoughts or who have attempted only engage in services 37%. So there's a lot of folks out there who are struggling with these issues who are not seeking help, even though we've made a great deal of progress. So mental health issues certainly impact the individuals, and but they also impact our institutions. Data shows that students with mental health problems are twice as likely to leave an institution without graduating, and that's even controlling for other factors. Okay. And there's an economic impact as well. So there's a formula to calculate the return on investment, and based on enrollment size, the approximate dropout rate, and then the average tuition rate. Counseling services, just in terms of treatment, not in terms of education or prevention, is estimated to have retained 281 students. And that means that there's about $7 million of added tuition, and then about $56 million of added lifetime earnings for those students. And the cost of providing that treatment, in my best estimate based on the data that I have, is about $6 million. So at a cost of $6 million, we take in $7 million more dollars of tuition, and we give back to society $56 million. So it's not just the right thing to do for many reasons. There's an economic value to it as well. There's good news too. We in college counseling centers have made a very positive and meaningful difference in student outcomes. I mean, again, I think if you talk to any of us in college counseling centers, we'll be able to talk a little bit about our success stories while maintaining confidentiality. And it can be resource intensive in that, personnel and engagement it does cost resources, but it also promotes student success and well-being. And the other thing that I'm very proud of is that our collaboration across the 4 campuses is at a high, and we've really allowed each other to learn from us and shared resources. Partners in Prevention has been an amazing resource. We are members of the Association for University and College Counseling Center Directors. We have standards in terms of IACS, which is the accreditation board, and we really have worked together moving forward for the Senate Bill 807. So we're doing good work. We make a difference, and it's important work, and we appreciate your support.
Okay, so the next step is we're going to have a panel conversation, discussion from each of the 4 campuses. So if I could have my panelists come up and join me here with it. They're going to be introducing themselves. Yes. Here? No, sit down. So if we could have our, I guess more than 4. Count very well this early in the morning, this far from home, right? So if we could have our panel members kind of briefly introduce themselves and say a little bit about kind of what their connection to college mental health. We have, again, been purposefully in identifying a wider range, so it's not just counseling center directors that you're hearing from today. Was it? So,
Good morning. I am DeAndre Braddix. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Student Affairs at UMSL. And within my position, I encounter student mental health in a couple different ways. One, within my portfolio, I have the Campus Assessment Response and Evaluation Team. So that the acronym is CARE. So the CARE team we formed about 2 years ago to address situations involving students in crisis and distress. And we have seen about 150 of those students pretty consistently since forming that group. Also, I have student conduct and community standards, and sadly, when you have students with mental health concerns, sometimes there are referrals for behavioral issues, and so that's how I encounter students with mental health concerns.
Good morning. You've met me. I'm Patty Fleck. I'm Director of Counseling Services at S&T, and I want to tell you a little bit about our student body. So S&T is a highly selective campus. It's STEM-focused and mid-size, and we're in a pretty rural setting. So we have a pretty traditional campus in that our students are enrolled full-time most of the time. There's 76% male, and this is oftentimes the first time that these students who have been highly successful in the past come to campus and for the first time struggle or fail. And that can be really, really challenging to their identity, and they don't know how to do that. And so we see a lot of students who are struggling with that.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Mossgruber. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Missouri St. Louis. I'll be the student representative on the panel today. For the last 2 years, I have worked with the Associated Students of the University of Missouri, which is a nonpartisan advocacy organization that works in Jefferson City. For the last 2 years, we've advocated, well, more than 2 years, but while I've been there for 2 years, we've advocated for increased state funding that would then go to the university for increased services in the mental health realm. So I can speak somewhat to the student experience and also to attitudes in the state legislature towards increasing funding for mental health services.
Good morning. I'm Jamie Shutter, and I am at Mizzou. I am the interim executive director of student health and well-being, and am serving on the panel to as a student affairs administrator, and really will be addressing it from the perspective of the pressure that student affairs administrators feel to respond to the needs and address concerns as they relate to mental health on campus.
Good morning. I'm Chris Brown, and I am serving as the interim dean of students and vice provost for student affairs on the UMKC campus, and also chair of the Division of Counseling and Educational Psychology. And so in my portfolio is our Counseling, Health, and Testing and Disability Center. And also, I just want to add that Student Affairs is responsible for student engagement and providing community of connectedness and belongingness, and so we are attending to how those kinds of engagement activities also directly speak to student well-being and providing an experience of students where the whole person can be addressed. So I come to you from the student affairs side and the interest in student well-being from that perspective.
Okay, so we really have before us kind of a two-part conversation. So we have here all together, we have an opportunity to have questions for the panelists. If there are other issues that you've seen that you've arised that have not been addressed, or the other things. And then immediately following this, we'll be breaking up into those 6 groups for a little bit more interactive. You have a chance to sit down with a variety of people at the 4 campuses as well, with it, and some upper administrators will be joining us as well. So you start with questions or issues.
I'll start. Jennifer, I'm just interested, since you're a recent student, more of your perspective on the whole issue.
Oh, sure, I could share a lot. I would like to say that I'm a non-traditional student, so I'm 30. So I feel like I have a unique perspective in that I started college 10 years ago and finished just now, and I've witnessed significant changes, certainly, and some of them seem very insurmountable. I think Patty mentioned climate change and increased technology access. These things aren't things that I think are going to be solved easily, but I think they're things that need to be kept in mind when we're talking about solutions. I personally have seen those things affect the attitudes of my fellow students absolutely on a daily basis. And I think the only way to harness those insurmountable problems is to have action-oriented therapies, things that give students a sense of agency, that they can actually make an impact on the world. Sitting in a room talking to someone is very helpful, and I've certainly benefited from it myself. But I think thinking outside the box and finding ways that you can incorporate actions and solutions into these much broader problems into therapy, I think is a good step.
Chris?
I'm holding it down. Good. Can we go back to the slide? Percent changes. I just want to. That one. Perfect. When you look at the percent, like when you have to think about staffing, kinds of staffing occurs, it's probably a little better and more realistic to look at something like panic attacks that has gone from 15% to 28% as a near doubling of over that time. So in terms of staffing, there's been a huge crush on a lot of staffing issues, and you see it nationwide. And I've read things where some of the larger universities have a very hard time getting students in quickly, and that becomes a real issue for access. So I appreciate the balancing of access and the staffing concerns here, and I'm just curious what everybody is doing to help that balance on the various campuses.
So let me just mention that what you pointed out is certainly the case, even on our campus where we've had an increase in demand, and Dr. Flett talked about how students are, there's a greater demand. The personal and the self-stigma is less than what it has been, and so there was a time when we were having difficulties with getting people to seek treatment and service utilization, and so it really is nice that the stigma has been less and that students are coming forward, and at the same time, staffing issues have been complicated. So I will tell you that on the UMKC campus, when we've bumped up against that, we also have a community counseling and assessment service, and we've worked with our counseling center to send students who are at very low risk. Maybe those students are dealing with just relationship difficulties or some anxiety around testing, midterm time, finals time, to our counseling center in our School of Education to try to help manage that so that we're not creating a wait list of students that will not ever be able to get in. But it continues to be a problem, and we're aware of it and we're looking at it. We're also fortunate that this budget season we'll be able to increase our staffing so that we can kind of help with that. So it is something that we are aware of, and we know that it's a challenge, and we are doing things to try to manage that wait list. And I think the Counseling Center has gotten creative with trying to offer other services and really looking at what students might need before they actually get individual counseling to help with that.
go to Kristen first.
And of course, the numbers illustrate that there's been a rise in need for mental health support for our students, and they have a lot of more different issues. Tell me what's been going on in the offices to try and keep up with that, besides just, increasing staff. But how have you had to evolve or adapt to these changes?
I'll tackle that first. So one of the things that I'm very proud of at S&T is that we have put a lot of thought and intentionality in developing our group counseling program. Some of our programs are very skill-based, like building social confidence. Some of them are specific to a topic in terms of minors for recovery, for substance issues. Some of them are just more general and process therapy group for ongoing issues. And the idea is that group is oftentimes the best treatment for presenting concerns. You find out that you're not alone. You find out it's a safe environment to practice new skills and to develop new skills. And it's really rewarding to also share your experience and help somebody else. So we've grown our group program significantly in the last couple of years. The other thing that we've done is shifted to a walk-in model so that anytime during the day, a student can come in and be seen within, if not immediately, within 15, 20 minutes. And so that's really helped us with access. The other thing that we at S&T have done, and I think other campuses as well have done, is really partner with colleagues on campus, whether that's Res Life or the police department or our wellness departments and certainly student health, and really try to have a holistic approach. We have peer student health educators who do some of the programming and education, and that low-level connections are really, really helpful. We do some online stuff so that students can access resources on our website. And so for students who may not be ready to come in or may just need some information, we really work at providing that as well.
I follow up and ask, how hard is it to get students to join a group session? Is that difficult, or are they very amenable to that, or what?
That's a great question. Some of that depends on how it's presented. And I'll give you an example. If you go to the doctor and you say, I have this thing going on and please give me an antibiotic, it may not be what you need, even if it's what you think you want. And so part of it is having the counselors and mental health providers be really on board with group and be able to talk about the advantages of that. And the other thing I talk to students about with group is coming in and talking to me today was probably a little challenging. That first step of coming in and trying something new and addressing something that's uncomfortable can be scary and challenging. But you're here and it's not as bad as you thought. And if you've been doing any kind of individual work, you find out that it gets pretty comfortable pretty easy. That's what group is like. And so it's pretty easy to sell. I mean, not everybody will buy into it, but it's a good.
Is most counseling, though, one-on-one rather than in a group? Or are you moving to that kind of a model?
I think most of it is still one-on-one, but this is a nice alternative and a supplement to that. So some students just do group, some do both for a little while, and some really are more involved with individual.
I mean, there's another two pieces that are involved with that as well. I think we talk about outreach, outreach and training are other pieces, aspects of the comprehensive college center model. And outreach, it used to be, I'm speaking from the UMSL perspective, that a lot of times our outreach was just like, hey, we're here, advertising sort of things. We don't do that anymore. We don't need to get word out. Of course, we still need to make sure that students know where we are and things like this, but our outreach is much more intentional, actually doing something. This is an outreach, it's about assisting people with social interactions, about assisting people with dealing with distress, things like that. And then also we're working with doing training as well to be leading workshops, things like that, on greater connection to the community. Again, the social media aspect of it, this technology has led to a lot of isolation. I mean, we're more connected but more isolated at the same time. So I think those are two other pieces. So it's not just specifically just what's happening in the therapy rooms as well. That I think that's what we've really made this huge step forward is, group and then the community engagement out there where we can assist each other.
I would like to add that we recognize on our campus that student mental health is not just a counseling center issue, but that the whole campus has a responsibility in student mental health. And so our campus leadership has kind of charged student affairs with really thinking about how do you address student mental health before students end up at the counseling center door, and then we're making decisions about group counseling or individual counseling. But as Dr. Sullivan pointed out, really kind of paying attention to those outreach activities, educational activities, and preventative activities that we can offer to students very early on in their campus experience, so that we are all engaged in helping and responding to student mental health, and it's not just the counseling center's responsibility.
I would add that, I would echo that, and also add that, mental health really needs to be addressed and prioritized at the institutional level. There's many things that other folks on campus can do to ensure that students who are experiencing mental health concerns are consistently met with support, validation, and information, and that mental health and well-being is valued and embedded in the culture of the university. And so some of the work that Chris referenced is just that. It's making sure that we're talking to our partners and administrators on campus to ensure that we have systems in place and the education in place so that we can take more of a socio-ecological approach to this issue on campus.
Question. So I had the pleasure of meeting with representatives from the counseling center here at MU that talked about the use of technology to complement some of the efforts within the counseling centers as an additional tool to maybe even build capacity, be utilized by community members, even at times when they're not within the counseling center. Curious as to how technology might be is being utilized on some of the other campuses within the system. Are there opportunities to collaborate? Does system play a role in helping to kind of provide universal application on a particular tool? This particular tool that was shared was Pacifica.
We're going to be presenting on that
Oh,
shortly.
you are also, so I'll stop that. But I will say,
Christy Hutton, who's going to be presenting on that.
I will say I was very excited about it, and I have a daughter in high school who suffers from anxiety and depression, and so I asked her to utilize the tool, particularly the free portion, and within one day she said, I absolutely love this tool. So I'm just curious as to that and the expansion of that, or the use of other tools on our respective institutions.
Yeah, at the final aspect, the final piece of our presentation today is we're going to have two presentations on college mental health in a rural environment, and then Christy Hutton from the MU Counseling Center is going to talk specifically about Pacific or Sunvelo. I'm not sure what his name is today with it. As of today, Sunvelo with it.
Sorry for being
Same
premature.
product, they're just kind of some branding things that are going on.
I will say though that what we find is that students really, they best respond to intervention strategies or opportunities that are high impact but low commitment. And so at least at UMSL, so we have an older student population that have many demands, so they may work part-time or full-time in many cases as well, and have a family, and so they want something that's going to be meaningful but for low investment. So they don't need to drive back to campus, or they don't need to spend an hour and a half in an office per se. And so technology is essential to meeting the needs of those students, especially at a campus like UMSL. Thank you.
Part of a multi-pronged approach.
So I was surprised to learn that at least on one of our campuses, you can be seen on a walk-in basis. Our last student curator before Avery was, I think, quite adamant that we needed to expand the services because on that particular campus, and I think it was the MU campus that she was talking about, it was a 2 or 3 week wait. And I'm not sure that when you're offering these kinds of services that without identifying And that's probably an in-person discussion, not a telephone, I need to see somebody. Timing is all important. So I'm curious about whether all the campuses feel that they have the ability to take people in on a walk-in basis. If we do, then that's great. If we don't, what can we do to help do that early identification of those in crisis and those that have relationship issues that can wait?
C does offer a walk-in crisis, and I believe it's 10 to 2, so that students can walk in. And it's great because you're absolutely correct that mental health issues don't just get scheduled, right? So students experience stressors and anxieties at times, and the notion that somebody would have to wait 2 or 3 weeks to be seen is just really not acceptable. So we do offer the walk-in crisis as well.
At UMSL, there's never been a concern in regards to having a student, providing the student an ability to speak with a clinician immediately. Even if all of our clinicians or counselors are in appointments, fortunately, Chris Sullivan, as the director of health counseling and disability access services, he's a clinician by training, and so we can actually just utilize him since he doesn't have an active caseload of clients.
To be a little bit more specific about that as well, we have, so I think there's really two things, talking about access with it. I think it's talking about emergency on one hand and kind of access on the other. I mean, it's very much, we have, and I hesitate to use too close to the medical model with it, but it's really kind of deciding, is this you need a yearly physical, you need to check in on something that's urgent, is this urgent care, or is this an emergency room situation? You're kind of paralleling it with the medical environment with it. So we have available, a student comes in and says, you know, I'm back to the suicide slide that we had, you know, I'm thinking I'm having thoughts of suicide, they will be seen immediately. So we're equipped and staffed to be able to see someone 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. We have after-hour phone service. I think MU as well also has that as well. So that, I think it's immediate with it. Sometimes though, somebody says, yeah, things aren't great, I'm not doing well with it, we attempt to get them in as soon as possible. And the reality of that is, with our staffing and our increased kind of concerns, that may be a week or two with it. I think that depends with it. But again, we're all very much committed to saying, we don't turn people to say, you know, I'm not sure that I'm going to make it home today with it. We do not turn people. I think I can comfortably say that for all 4 campuses. Yes. We are not ever in a position where somebody tells us that they're in risk of serious injury, harm to themselves or to anyone else, that we're going to turn them away or say, come back with your concerns in 2 weeks or next week or even tomorrow with them.
And our model at Mizzou is very similar to what Chris described. So we have crisis counselors available during our opening hours, and then open crisis line access 24/7 beyond that, and that we triage basically what comes in the door.
There were some people back there. Yes, please.
Good morning. I find I usually have to preface my talking with, I'm about as non-traditional student as you can get. I'm 55 years old, a disabled veteran living in the dorms, a first-year transfer student. If we look at these statistics, not only are they on the rise, but those are students presenting with issues. And if, as someone who lives on second floor of Galena, let's just cut this across the board and say 1 out of 2 students suffer from one of these. Well, their roommate is also suffering. The room next to them and across the hall, their friends, their classmates. And if you start looking at these circles overlapping, you realize that it's the entire campus. And it is a cultural thing, as Ms. Sutter pointed out, that we need to start implementing. It's not just a staffing or a money. It's on the rise. It's serious. I'm also a veteran, Student Association Senator, and Mizzou Student Veterans Association Secretary. When it comes to veterans' health issues, you can assume that it's much higher. So as far as access to care, we also have to take into consideration those marginal students like our international students who have difficulties with barriers of language and culture and stigma, as well as our minority population. So we can look at the statistics and the changes, but that's just a snapshot. But what we need to do, and I'm glad that you're all here addressing mental health issues this year, we need to press the state and the federal government and whatever institutions that we need to do to ensure that student success is a priority and that this is the pinnacle of it. Thank you.
Thank you. What is your name, sir? And what do you study?
I'm Jeffrey Ford, and I'm a geography and political science major. And
Thank you.
I'm now a senior.
Thank you. Thank you.
And still living in the dorm.
I will continue.
Any?
I would echo what you said in terms of it's bigger and broader, and the solutions need to be much more systemic, not just individual, not just campus, but societal, and that's really important. The other piece that I would echo is that there are groups of students, whether that's international or minority or first generation or veterans or students with disabilities, who all present, or student athletes who all present unique as well as these common issues that we're talking about. Some of them are universal, and then those special groups have specifics that are unique to them.
And that's where collaborations are extremely important because there are so many nuances with these populations. So when we have situations that occur with a veteran, we have to work with our Veterans Center or even a local organization, figure out what the best strategies are to engage that student in a way that can actually help them seek the assistance they need. International students, when you have to call a parent who is parent of a student who is from a culture where mental health is, there's a lot of stigma around it, you have to figure out a creative way to explain to them that their child is in crisis and needs their attention without offending them at the same time. And we know that we have some of those basic skills, but at the same time, we have to tap those local and campus resource collaborations to figure out how to best and effectively communicate.
I just want to echo as a campus partner, I'm Susan Even, a family physician and the director of the Student Health Center at the University of Missouri. And I've seen over the years the increasing role of primary care physicians. So our student health centers at all 4 campuses are, we are active partners. And when you talk about stigma in some of the populations, international students and minority students, sometimes they come to the doctor for something. And we have implemented over the past probably 5 to 10 years a routine screening process for all students who come to the Student Health Center to look for early signs of depression and anxiety. Sometimes they're quite far along. And we have behavioral health consultants. We have, and now in our new integrated program at the University of Missouri, we will have an opportunity to continue to look at creative ways to get those students care. We provide psychiatric care, both our primary care doctors and our psychiatrists. So I think the role of partners and kind of innovative ideas and continuing to look at unexpected places for the symptoms and signs of mental illness and early, sometimes pretty far advanced cases. So thanks.
Another service that I'd like to talk about too is we have a care coordinator, and so students who need to navigate the system, whether they're leaving campus or returning to campus or have some kind of either personal or family emergency, what services, what resources will help them get through that and then back in the classroom and back to being successful. So that's a really also part of that comprehensive, holistic mental health, mental well-being safety net that's available.
So yesterday, I was engaged in a discussion with a couple of folks that are presenting or present here today, and if I'm understanding that conversation, our student health can help a person up to a point, but it's a fairly finite point, so many visits. And then unless you're in a metropolitan area that has a really good safety net, then you're kind of at a loss as to what to do with someone who needs long-term counseling or a medication, and sometimes medications have to be monitored and so forth. Has anybody thought about what the cost would be? I think students now, with their tuition, pay for a certain amount of student health. But what would be the cost of adding to that in appropriate major cases that you could have extended care for those that need it, rather than simply saying, we can't help you any further, here's the names of a couple of agencies, hopefully they'll give you some free care to get you through the problem that we've identified. Would it cost a lot to have that? It's kind of like moving from short-term to long-term disability, and it reminds me of the EAPs that you have for employees. You may get 3 visits or 6 visits, then they turn you on to your own insurance because they can't help you because of the limitation. So it's really a system question is, what would be the cost for adding on a layer of extended care rather than just saying, we've taken you as far as we can?
Let me take a stab at that, and then I'm going to ask my colleagues for some backup here. I think what you've hit on is exactly that access versus treatment. And the vast majority of presenting concerns can be addressed in a brief treatment solution-focused model. And again, then the other resources also are available to help support that. I think that's one of the places where group counseling can come in, other resources can come in. And I'm not sure, again, what the cost would be to that. But I think we have to be aware of, I'm not sure exactly how to say it. You know, if you have an urgent care center, and then you're talking about adding a whole new service to that, or an emergency room to that, it's hard to think about that, I think.
Well, and sometimes it's less about the number of visits or counseling sessions that a student needs, and more about the level of need that they have above that. So I just met with a student recently who was removed for mental health concerns incident, and she's seeking return, and she went through court-mandated electroshock therapy. That's a pretty severe mental health concern, which we likely would not be able to address effectively in a counseling center on campus. And situations like that are increasing in volume. And so I think you'll find that outside of creating a whole different model, we would be ill-equipped to address those growing mental health starting to see in different pockets.
Agencies and resources that do like residential treatment that also then provide college credit. And sometimes that's a really good resource for a student for a short term, you know, a semester or year before they return.
Other universities do, and can't answer it today, but other universities that have better capacity to deal with longer term issues for their students, probably private universities. But most of us sitting here have our own private insurance, which does provide extended care. And frankly, I was thinking that when my kids went through here, that there wouldn't be a limit if they had mental problems in terms of what the care would be given. But I now know that there is a limit. Right now, some of those students are on their parents' insurance, but that may not survive in the future because they're talking about eliminating that extended insurance coverage. So you'll have students here that are used to having additional layered on insurance who aren't going to have it in the future, maybe. I don't think we can solve the problem, but it does seem to me that we can see what other universities are doing. Otherwise, you're going to have students where you simply reach the point where you can't help them, even though you know that they're going to fail because of their condition.
Really difficult question. I think the reality is that there are many, many things that we're just not able to participate in with it. I mean, fundamentally with it, I mean, if we really want to reduce it to its absolute essential, counseling services are here to assist students to be successful students. And unfortunately, there are mental illness cases present that prevent people from being students with it. So we need to be able to define that at some point. You know, I'm thinking about intensive patient, inpatient type opportunity when someone has a severe eating disorder, if there's an active substance abuse thing where someone needs to spend some time being medically detoxed, if there's overlapping concerns with medical concerns as well. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to have some boundaries with it. And I think that's where we operate in this really, really difficult area where it's like, we can help some, you know, is it enough? Are you able to continue being a student? And I don't mean to be so crass as to say this is all about credit hours. That is not what we're talking about. Because many times people's mental health is associated to their ability to continue moving forward, to have a path moving forward, to change their opportunities. That's why we're here, right? So it is at that same point, that very difficult conversation we have is, you know, what can we do to expand our services so that it's still ethical and professional and capable for us to be providing treatment and still not going beyond and still being able to assist and provide students with it. I don't know that any of us are at a strict limit, you know, you get 8 sessions and then you're out of here, things like that. It's that flexibility that just need to be inherent in the
So you would never max out of an emergency walk-in appointment, or also the ability to see a psychiatrist on our respective campuses for medication, maintenance, et cetera. I think it is just those other areas that we just don't typically, we've not gotten into, just a completely different model with a different level of care that isn't always consistent with providing a student service. But it's definitely something that can be explored.
I'd like to add that that probably for the majority of the students, kind of the brief solution-focused approach to treatment works, such that students come in and they know they have kind of a time limit and they're able to get the issues resolved or managed or massaged in that time frame. So it's probably a small percentage of students that might need that extra. And so from an ethical imperative, it would be inappropriate to have somebody who at that 8th session is still in need of something, and then because you're at a certain number, that student is told that they need to terminate and are no longer eligible for services. So I think that there is some flexibility around meeting students where their needs are, and there's also an ethical responsibility to make those appropriate referrals. So as we were talking about, sometimes those referral sources can do much more than what we are equipped and have the capacity to do. And so we have an ethical responsibility to know those referral sources and to get students connected to them.
I have a question here. Looking at these numbers are really concerning, and as Chancellor Maples has said, if you look at it, panic attacks from 15 to 28%, almost doubled. If you look at the trajectory here, is that trajectory or the rate of change going to abate, or is this going to keep increasing, which means the problem is going to get worse by the year? And we're already talking about 50% of the students. Is it going to be 100% of the students or 95% in 5 years from now? What would these numbers look like 5 years from now? And how are you going to cope with those numbers, let alone what we're trying to do today? Any thoughts on that?
I think that's what keeps us all up at night. I don't know that there's any way to tell what the future will hold. I think these trends will continue, and I think that's why we're here talking about these bigger, broader issues and looking at innovative ways to manage.
I would say when we have the technology part of the presentation today, and we look at products such as Sanvello and those types of things where we can intervene early and potentially prevent situations from escalating to the point where they're needing the use of intensive resources. Nobody has a crystal ball to know what the future trend lines are going to, which direction they're going to go. I think that there could be a lot of debate about what's contributing to this, and there are some things that may drift off, and there may be things that actually ramp things up. So it's really hard to know where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years, but I think that we need to plan for an increase and do everything that we can to try to serve the students as the best that we can.
And this is where training becomes key in regards to making sure that resident advisors in our respective residential communities are equipped and are skilled to detect when students are dealing with things, faculty as well, staff as well. Hence the reason that we engage in respond training that was developed here at MU, and we use it at UMSL, and I don't know if the other campuses use it as well.
We have.
And we've trained 264 faculty and staff since 2016, I believe it is. And our goal is to keep training more faculty and staff so that way they can be aware of these signs and engage in early detection and make those referrals sooner rather than later.
I can certainly speak to the fact that students at UMSL, and I would imagine the other campuses as well, utilize their advisors, I think, just as much as they utilize the counseling services. I'm very grateful for my advisor. She's given me a lot of time just to talk in her office. I'm not sure if she went through this particular training, but she is certainly adept at having the kind of conversations that I needed to have at the time. So if there could be more faculty like that, I think that would be very beneficial.
This is Chancellor Cartwright. First I want to thank all of you for the work that you do. Incredibly important to all of our students, and we know how hard it is. But I have a couple questions. One is, how do you look at all of the activities of a student, think about well-being in general? What's the interaction with food insecurity, housing insecurity, all of the other stresses, socioeconomic, socioecological, and how do we educate our faculty, our administrators, everyone in the complexity of these issues, and how do we do that effectively and efficiently? I think these are really important things. I think someone said it earlier, the difference in the acceptance of our students in understanding the need for help, and that the stigma is gone from when I was a student. But I still think that the stigma exists among people, my generation, and therefore it's difficult for us to have conversations in an open way, understanding that it's different than when we were in school. And how do we educate all of those populations, how we can make a much more inclusive environment that allows us to...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think there's two pieces of that. I think it's the ongoing education of campus faculty, staff, administrators, and I think it's, as new faculty and new staff come in, I think that climate does change over time, but I also think it needs to be some of the top-down stuff. Faculty are busy, and they're focused on teaching, they're focused on research, they're focused on those kinds of things, as well as dealing with students and advising. And so I think it's important to have a consistent message that we all play a part in it, and that it really is part of your job and the right thing to do. And so I think it's those three things.
So in regards to educating faculty and staff in engaging them in this topic, it's important that we make them aware of what their role really is and can be. So it's supporting the student. As a faculty member, it would be academically. So maybe you allow the student a small extension on an exam. We don't want faculty driving students to a place or giving them money for a hotel. There is an interplay between students dealing with housing insecurity and food insecurity and mental health concerns. We want to centralize that so we can look at it holistically. And in some cases, what we need to do is we need to remove that safety net so the student can realize the value of taking their medication or following the request of their family or whatnot. And so we really just need to make sure that what we're doing is we're looking at it holistically and not in these little microcosms, because we're not helping our students at the end of the day.
I think it takes really building a robust, healthy campus coalition where you have collaboration and partnerships from all sides of campus, and that's certainly my vision and my new role at the University of Missouri is to create this type of a coalition where we can really pull students, faculty, staff, administrators together, anybody who's really interested in health and well-being of our students and our faculty and staff, and creating this vision for health and well-being on campus, and that will bleed over into mental health because it's all interconnected. And if you have a successful strategy as it comes, relates to health and well-being, it's really a student success strategy in the end.
Yeah, and I echo that, and I want to say that part of what we will be trying to do more of on our campus is to really kind of bridge that gap between student affairs and academic affairs, and really trying to bring folks who should have a role in student health and well-being, so that it does not just fall on student affairs or counseling center. So we're going to be looking at trying to engage faculty at all different units on what that should look like and what their role and their responsibility might be. We currently have a care team, and I will tell you that the representatives of that care team include administrators, excuse me, on campus. It includes a few faculty and counseling center folks, and that meeting is led by our conduct and civility person, and so we have police staff. So everybody is involved in talking about student issues that come up, and then what responsibility and where we can draw from resources to help. So it's a very collaborative approach, and it really is focused on student mental health and well-being.
And I will say, too, it's really important when we're doing these trainings that we work to address the misconception that student mental health equates to student threat. Many times they can be conflated, especially when we're in student affairs and also in counseling as well, that you deal with faculty and staff that see a student that's, let's say, talking to themselves, or that are crying. That's actually a big one. They immediately think this person is suicidal or this person is homicidal, and we have to change that narrative of no, that person isn't inherently a risk to themselves or others. Let us do the assessment. And so it's just making people comfortable with, sometimes a student's baseline is going to be that they're in this kind of consistent level of crisis or distress, but it's not to the point where they're at harm themselves, where we have to hospitalize.
We're ready to move into the next phase of this, so we have groups.
I think we have 5 more minutes for
5 more
questions.
minutes?
So we
Okay.
have 2 questions, one
Okay.
from Chancellor Maples and one from Provost Latha Ramchan. You did?
Thank you. My question is really more of a comment to the point that Chancellor Cartwright raised, which is, I think, an excellent point, in that our generation still looks on it as it's something that we're uncomfortable discussing. But at the same time, what we heard was that it has to be a collective effort. I really think that if we put this on the radar screen of faculty at all points, but make it simple for them, they will embrace this concept that they're more than just instructors in a classroom. And I'm saying this because we're planning new faculty orientation for the coming year. I would love to incorporate some of these elements so that when they come in as faculty, we start that conversation from the beginning. The department chair's retreat, the dean's retreat, every occasion we get to, and it's not so much about the problem, the magnitude of the problem has to be shared, but if we can give them like one slide of, this is what we need to do, these are some of the conversations, actionable items, I think we can move the needle on this, so thank you.
That is the exact direction we need to go.
We have found that faculty are extremely receptive to conversations we have regarding our care process, because basically what it does is it helps them to identify maybe those areas of concern, and all it says is just make a referral. Just go online, fill out these 10 fields, submit it to us, and then you're basically done until we need something from you. So we help to define that role, and we help to guide them through the process. So we're not asking them to address it, because that, of course, could be an area of concern for them if they were responsible for addressing this entirely. Instead, we say, you're a key partner in terms of detecting that there's something going on. Make us aware of that, so then we can actually take the steps necessary to address it.
And so I want to follow up on something that Curator Phillips was talking about, and that is, I'll just ask bluntly, how are you funded? What buckets of money? Because I know it's not just tuition dollars. So to the extent that you can answer it, how are you funded?
Counseling services at S&T are funded in part through general operating funds. We also are funded by a student health fee, And then the students have also, and I believe curators have also supported an additional increase in that student fee.
Health services, counseling services at UMSL is funded through general revenue allocation from the university, and then there's a small bucket of money that is generated through fees associated with counseling that are on a sliding scale, and if students can't afford to pay, nothing.
Our student emergency fund is funded entirely through donations. It's not university supported.
And similarly, UMKC relies on the general revenue allocation and then the student health fees as part of tuition.
Yeah, I partly asked that because of the importance of the student health fee in having this scaffolding in place generally. It's not just a question of students having insurance and going in and paying for something. You've got to have a broader population covered for some of the students who don't have that coverage, who aren't on their parents' insurance. And yet for them, in paying a health fee, a part of it, it's more or less, there's not a financial barrier for them getting that kind of help. And I think that's an important aspect of what we deliver.
Top down.
All right, so let's continue the conversation. We have a little bit, we have, I believe, 6 groups identified with it. So you have a card that has a group number assigned to you with it. And again, we have a variety of people at the tables with it from different campuses, from different roles at the universities with it. And the objective here is, again, just to have this open conversation, what kind of struck you with it. And if we could have, then when we come back here, we'll just have kind of a brief summary of each of the conversations that happened at the tables. So if we could start moving over towards just on the other side of the panel here.
Good morning, everyone. We are going to start the session again, so if I can ask you to take your seats. All right, Dr. Sullivan, you're up.
Okay, so now the next part of this is we're going to be having some presentations on some upcoming initiatives, some approaches that we're taking. So we're going to have Dr. Christy Hutton, who is the outreach coordinator here at the MU Counseling Center, talk about that app that we've mentioned a couple of times.
Thanks, Chris. I've also been asked on behalf of the Counseling Center directors to say to all of our provosts and chancellors that our mental health staff are more than happy to come and talk to our deans and chairs and faculty members. And also in response to some of the questions and comments that happened next door, also was asked to comment on the fact that some of our campuses do have access to an after-hours crisis response system so that our students, faculty, and staff and parents can call 24 hours a day to get support. So that's available, and it could be available on all of our campuses if it isn't already. So now to my order of business. Let's talk about the app formerly known as Pacifica. If you search for it today on your phone, you will still have to search for it by Pacifica. Next week, I believe the rollover will come to Sanvello. So I'm really excited. This is an initiative I've been working on for several months here at Mizzou, and what we're hoping is that by bringing a phone app that provides mental health, for lack of a better word, coaching, it's mental health skills that you can actually carry around in your pocket all day long so that you have access when you need it, and maybe more accessible for those students for whom coming into the counseling center is more taboo or more difficult. So a little bit about how the program works. This gives you an idea about what it may look like, the look and feel of the program. And a lot of the apps that are out there really focus on mindfulness and breathing strategies, which are great. And for some of our students work really, really well. Sanvello takes this to another level. It's actually based on cognitive behavior therapy principles and skills. And so it will actually walk you through specific skills for how to change your thought process. And the kind of underlying idea behind cognitive behavior therapy is that if you can change how you think, you change how you behave, you change how you feel. And so Sanvello offers tools to help students do exactly that. One of the things that I think is really powerful about having a tool like this, within the app there are places where students can connect with one another. And I say students, but actually when we bring this to our campus, which we're hoping to have it here at Mizzou by August, it also is available to all of our faculty, staff, and online students. So anybody who has any of the versions of that missouri.edu email address will be able to use this application once we have it launched here on our campus. So there are community platforms that can help decrease stigma and enhance help seeking, but also I think it provides opportunities for students to help themselves, and that's a really empowering thing that we can do. If we can have our students, our faculty, and our staff with the tools that they need to manage basic mental health needs. And at times when, if your anxiety goes up, it's really hard for your brain to engage and remind you of all the things you know to do to take care of yourself. And so if you can pull out your phone, even in those periods of higher anxiety, and say, oh yeah, I do know what to do to get through this, that's a really important thing that I think this phone app can provide. The app is customized, so when it rolls out on the Mizzou campus, it will roll out with Mizzou campus resources embedded in it. So it'll still look like this. It won't be black and gold, I'm sorry. But it will have all of our local resources that are available for our students as well as our faculty and staff. So we'll have our employee assistance information in there as well as our campus information. I think we vetted a number of programs before we settled on this one. And one of the things that makes this program stand out is that it is rooted in science. It's based on science, and it has a lot of tools in it that can help us complement therapy work for those students who have come into our counseling center seeking services. So while initially on our campus we plan on rolling out the self-help version, so the piece that's strictly something that you could use on your own to get through a difficult time, down the road we're hoping to also roll out a second piece of this which allows a therapist working in our counseling center to connect with their student through the phone app. So rather than seeing that student every week or every 2 weeks, when they start to do better and they're really needing some time to go out and flex their muscles and build their skills, they can know that they still have that safety net of their therapist, but we're actually touching base through the phone app and giving them things to do through that phone app. And so that also can enhance our ability to meet some of our access demands while continuing to provide a good resource for the students that we have. And then once students leave our center, they'll have those tools in their pocket ongoing. We also hope through our outreach to begin to develop workshops and to connect with campus partners who we can train in how to incorporate Sanvello in what they're doing. So then our whole campus is involved in having this tool available for students. And did I mention it works for our online students? I'm going to throw that in there 3 or 4 times. I think that's really important because that's a question that's difficult for our counseling centers to answer, as we have legal and ethical limits to what we can do across state lines. And so Sanvello is something that we'll be able to put in the hands of all of our online students. I think also there are a number of studies that Sanvello has done looking at their product, as well as some studies through University of Michigan, University of Kentucky, that when our students are engaging with this product, and when people in general, so some of the Sanvello studies are more population-based, University of Michigan and Kentucky are looking more at student populations, what we see is that symptoms for anxiety and depression go down, and self-efficacy, or that sense that I can handle my own business, goes up. And so what we're doing, in essence, by putting this tool in the hands of our students is empowering them to be more mentally healthy and have a greater sense of well-being across the board. Okay. All right. I also want to just note part of why we opted to settle on this particular app, because there are several of them out there. In addition to it just being the best app from our students' perspective, so having the greatest number of skill sets and tools available to our students, they also have a fantastic staff and support package. So when we are working with Sanvello, they have done most of the heavy lifting for how we bring this to our campus. I'm involved on the periphery saying, yes, we want to do that. Let's move forward with this piece of it. This is what we need from you. These are the campus partners that we need to have at the table, like our IT and our legal folks who are navigating those contracts as we speak. But they have a whole marketing package that will help us roll this out, and they work with our campus identity standards to make sure that it fits for our campus. They'll customize the package for us so that our students have Mizzou or UMSL or UMKC or S&T in their pocket, as well as this app. And they also will do on-the-ground training and support for this as we roll it out and then ongoing down the road. So I really feel like as I reached out and I worked with this company in particular, they were very responsive to us, and they really seemed to get higher education and campus mental health. And so I'm really excited. Like I said, we are hoping to have this program on our campus by August, and I know some of our, well, actually all of our partners across the state have interest in having this program down the road as well. So I'm open for questions if.
So is this program available for all students at the UM system, or is it available just at Mizzou?
Right now, Mizzou is in the process of contracting. It would be fantastic if we could roll it out as a whole system. That's certainly a possibility.
So thank you. We will look into that possibility, especially if we bring the 4 universities together, maybe some volume discounts as well. So.
I did ask that question,
Yes.
and the person I was talking to didn't quite have the authority to answer that question, but he did indicate it could be possible.
That's great. Thank you.
And it's also for faculty and staff, am I right?
It is correct. We pay for it based on students only, but then it's available to anybody with that email address.
I do have a quick question. Are there any liability issues attached to this?
Oh, sorry. There do not seem to be any liability issues associated with it. So the package itself meets all of the federal guidelines for HIPAA. It meets all of the accessibility guidelines. And in the self-help app by itself, we've not engaged or taken on those students or faculty or staff as clients. So it's no different than if you were to download Headspace or Calm on your phone today and use that app. That's a great question. Thank you.
So a question for members of the audience. How many of those individuals who work in counseling and mental health for students would like to see this product on your campuses? Okay, who doesn't want it on their campuses? Okay, so I think we know what the next steps are. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and then our final formal presentation, at least for today, is we've been talking a lot about college mental health, but it's also important to consider kind of what students have been through before they end up on our campuses with it. So we have 2 representatives, Dr. Keith Herman and Dr. Wendy Ranke, who are here from the National Center for Rural School Health to talk about mental health implications.
All right, so this last opportunity is really just trying to connect some of the conversations we've been having today to some of the work that Wendy and I have been, and others have been doing at Mizzou for the last decade or so. In 2007, we founded the Missouri Prevention Center, and we have as our lofty mission to reduce the societal prevalence and burden of youth mental health concerns. So when we talk about the trajectories of these problems, we are trying to alter those trajectories, and so that fewer students are coming to college with these concerns. And we think some of the things that we've learned along the way are also relevant to the conversations you're having about what to do with college students, even though our work principally focuses on kids birth through age 18. And so we take a prevention science approach, which is a very strategic way to use good science to solve what I would call big world problems. And so when we talk about changing the population health, we're talking about a big world problem. And so this approach is necessarily interdisciplinary, which not only means that we, just 2 people alone are going to solve a big world problem from one field. Not only do we work with scholars from fields across campus and across the country, but we've come to realize interdisciplinary really means working with stakeholders in the communities that we're trying to change. And so for us, we work with school superintendents, we work with law enforcement officials, we work with judges and the legal system, and with public health officials, because it's these people that have the expertise to actually alter the levers of society that we know need to change if we're going to impact, population change. And then we also know that the things that we're doing, at least at the scale we're doing them, requires money. And so we've been fortunate to have received a lot of funding, so nearly $50 million of funding, mostly in the form of federal research grants, but most recently from our local county here, right here in Boone County, and Wendy's going to tell you about one of the projects.
Yeah, so those of you who don't know, Boone County a few years ago passed a tax that a portion of all of our sales tax comes back to this pot of money that supports youth mental health. And as part of that, a few years ago, the 6 school districts, the superintendents all got together, had me come talk to them, and we developed this Boone County School Mental Health Coalition to where we roll out prevention and intervention supports to all of our youth in Boone County, about 25,000 students, K to 12. For the past 4 years. So one of the things we do is we have a universal screener where teachers report on risk indicators that we know are linked to later mental health problems among their students. We also have a student report where they report on their own risk indicators for student mental health. And these things, it's all online. So another component to interdisciplinary work we're finding is working with computer programmers. So they're awesome, and they can help build these systems. So this is all online. As soon as the students take it, it closes. It populates reports for the schools to look at, and we have mental health providers out in the schools with them, helping them to use this data to identify evidence-based interventions to use either at the universal level. You know, if they have 40% of their students are having some sort of social skills or peer relationship problem, we say don't do one kid at a time. Do something school-wide. And so we implement universal prevention programs in our school buildings, as well as identify kids who might benefit from group therapy or individual therapy as well. So that's the Boone County School Mental Health Coalition. And what we recently did was there was a call for a National Center for Rural Education. We put in an application for a National Center for Rural School Mental Health, and we received it. So we actually just kicked that off yesterday. We had all of our partners here. So this is the National Center is a $10 million center funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences. There was 2 awarded, and we got one. Harvard got the other one. And what we're doing is basically taking our coalition model and building it up and putting it on steroids and pushing it out across the state of Missouri, Montana, and Virginia. So we have partners from 3 different states working with us on this project, and it's very exciting. Rural schools here in Missouri are very excited about it. We had a meeting yesterday. We had representatives from 6 different rural school districts in Missouri come to talk to us about what their challenges are, what the benefits of this would be for them, and so we're very excited and privileged to be doing this work.
So in terms of impact, these activities really define our system as a national leader in addressing mental health issues across the age spectrum. And so the work that our large group of colleagues are going to be doing over the next 5 years is going to continue to set the stage, and the nation will look to Mizzou for guidance on these very issues. I think it does offer lessons for how to prevent and intervene with college students, and especially in terms of this public health lens that I've heard alluded to through a lot of our conversations today, that it's not just sending kids to a counseling center, it's how do we work together as a community to meet the needs of all of our students so that they are less likely to have those more intensive service needs. And so, yeah, it does. We are collecting ongoing data to see if we are indeed reducing the population level prevalence of these types of issues. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a couple more minutes with it. If there are any final questions with it, or
Any questions for Professor Ranke or Herman? So I have a question.
I was just wondering if there have been any press releases or how you're getting the word out about that. Cameron's not in here.
Mizzou Media has been awesome with us, so whenever we have new papers or anything, they meet with us and they get out information about our particular studies and findings. And there has been a press release. It was officially awarded in February, so we started in February. And I know MU Media also had invited press to come talk to us after the reception yesterday too, so they're trying to get the message out, yeah.
So Dr. Herman, we're finding that many college students come to universities displaying concerns for mental health. What's some of the work that you can do through your center to identify those issues early and perhaps find some solutions prior to these students matriculating at the university?
So we were talking about in our group earlier, the risk factors for going on to develop mental health problems are no secret. We actually have a huge science. We can predict pretty well the types of things that will lead kids at an early age or at any stage of develop to go on to develop these problems. And so for us in K through 12, it's identifying those risk factors early, so we're not having to provide intensive interventions for kids after they've been suffering for many years. And so that's why one of the things we do is we do these universal screening of risk factors. We do it 3 times a year. We do it K through 12, so we can find kids who are displaying these problems and then intervene when we're seeing them. And so in a similar way, I could see colleges coming up with some sort of system to figure out what are the key risk factors. I mean, one of the reasons that you see so many college students developing problems during the college years is that we know during major life transitions, that's a major risk experience for people to try to adapt to this new setting. And so if we could develop some sort of ongoing data streams to help us identify those students that are most likely to go on and develop problems, we could provide some less intensive supports for them.
I was also going to add something that our group talked about. Because, as a prevention scientist, I started thinking, well, why don't we do some sort of universal curriculum here when our freshmen come on campus? Since we have such a high prevalence of these problems, if we had some sort of course, life skills course that they were taking, and they learned some of these cognitive behavioral coping skills, and then maybe in the next year they become mentors to the incoming freshmen. So we had that little discussion at our group, and our Prevention Science Institute would be happy to support something like that. So that's another idea.
Well, thank you. Let's thank the speakers once again. Wendy, Keith, thank you very much. So in terms of some closing thoughts, today's session was both enlightening but also very sobering. We realized that more students are coming to universities who display concerns for mental health. And just during the past 5 years, we've seen that issues such as addiction, depression, anxiety have increased dramatically. In fact, over the past 5 years, the percentage of students who have suicidal thoughts increased from about 15% to 23%. Now, we also learned about the very innovative programs that are occurring at all 4 universities, and they are making some very positive and meaningful impact to the lives of our students, and we really do appreciate it. But as was discussed, this is not just an issue for counseling and mental health, but we need a collaborative, a cohesive and robust approach that integrates faculty, staff, peer students, and others to contribute to improving the mental health of our students. So that's going to be key. So obviously there's more work to do. I think there's some opportunities for us to collaborate even more across the system, especially in taking a program like Pacifica, which has a different name now, but if we can roll that out to all 4 universities, that will immediately benefit our students at the UM system. So I love the fact that we've come together once again as a system to learn about best practices that occur to support a topic that is as important as this. So I want to thank all of you, thank the speakers, thank Dr. Sullivan for serving as the moderator for today. And I also want to thank the organizers, Steve Graham, Steve Chafin, and Jill Wood, and their colleagues for putting this program together. Thank you very much once again. Like I said, there's more work to do, but I'm very hopeful that with the group that we have, we are going to be making some dramatic gains in improving mental health for our students. Let me now turn it over to Chairman Sunvold.
Thank you very much, President. Again, what a great session, and great for us as a board to understand and to know what's going on and to make the positive changes in the future. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas? If not, I need a motion to adjourn and a second.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We're adjourned, and we will, thank goodness, we're not going outside to do some digging.
All right.
Thank you all.
Please join us for the groundbreaking of TPMC downstairs at 11 o'clock. Thank you.